What's up, brothers? Hope everyone's doing well out there. Just out here relaxing on a cool summer evening. Just got done with a little thunderstorm. I figured I'd turn the camera on and have a little conversation with you guys. And here's what I was thinking about. And I'll get to the point as the video goes on, and I think this will resonate with a lot of you guys out there, but it might take me a little bit to, unfold it and get into it. So, I was looking at a family picture the other day, and I counted exactly 25 people in the picture. And I got to thinking, the picture had my mom and my sister and my aunt and, some extended family, you could say, some people that had married in and some people that were new neighbors of my mother. So it was kind of a family picture with an extended family. Anyways, I got to thinking, if that same picture were taken about 20 years ago, 7 of the people that were in the picture would have been there, but the other 18 were all strangers to me. They were all new people, right? They had replaced the people that were there previously. And I'm not trying to say that making new friends and new connections and going out and meeting new people is a bad thing. Like, it's great to meet new people and invite them to your extended family, but what I'm saying is that's not really conducive to long-term relationship building. And if you think about it, that's probably the biggest reason why so many people are struggling with dating and relationships nowadays. Everyone wants to talk about feminism and hypergamy. Those are the 2 talking points that everybody wants to get into. But I don't find those to be very interesting talking points, because like, hypergamy just means that women like to date like high value guys or like attractive guys. Like, that's kind of common sense. And feminism, the thing about that is, before it came around, hypergamy still existed. The only difference was you had to battle the other men for the women, and only the top 1% of the top 1% of the baddest ass alphas in the world would actually get a woman, and the rest were just peasants that would never get one, right? So, I don't know. I think this is a much bigger issue. Just this issue of all of these options that we have and all of these choices we have to make. And I'm not talking about just in regards to relationships, because you maybe don't have a lot of options with relationships, or maybe you do. I'm talking friendships, I'm talking jobs, I'm talking where you want to live, what country you want to live in, what state you want to live in. We have all of these choices that we can make nowadays. And if you think about it, we've been programmed a certain way. We've been programmed to not pursue long-term relationships. When we were in school, each school year you would start out basically and just have a fresh start with new people. You'd have a new set of friends, strangers you had never met before, maybe a new best friend, maybe a new girlfriend, a new teacher. And each year, each semester, each class would bring in a fresh start with new people, and it's like the last one didn't even exist. And then eventually, maybe you graduate, you go to college, fresh start with new people. Each semester, fresh start with new people. Maybe you get a new job, and it's a fresh start with new people. You don't like that job. 3 years after you start it, you quit, and you go to a new job and a fresh start with new people. You move to a new state, a fresh start with new people. Maybe to a new country, a fresh start with new people. And we're programmed to do this. I know a lot of people think, well, becoming a high-value man and becoming a successful man is the route to becoming attractive in the eyes of women, or that's the route to being able to have long-term committed relationships. But if anything, that's probably the biggest culprit preventing guys from having that, because it's incentivized to travel. Like, if you want a promotion at work, the easiest way to get one is to go to a different facility. Maybe you live in Seattle, but they have a promotion in Chicago. Maybe you live in Cleveland, but they have a promotion in Tulsa. And maybe you live in Savannah, Georgia, but they have a promotion in Phoenix, Arizona, right? And that's just kind of the way it works. So they they have this current system where you're just having these constant fresh starts with new people. And you may date somebody, or you may get into a relationship, or you may have friendships with people based on the current situation, and maybe it makes sense to be with somebody, maybe it makes sense to be friends with these people in this current situation, but when you move on to the next situation, it doesn't make sense anymore. And in modern society, that's kind of how we're all programmed, if you think about it. And the crazy thing about it is it's not just friendships, it's not just relationships, it's not just jobs. Those are just the superficial talking points. But what it really is time. If you think about it in your life, and this is a brutal red pill, but if you think about it, you only have like a limited amount of chunks of time in your life, right? You have like your school years, that's one chunk of time. You have like your 20s where you're like educating yourself and trying to get a career going, that's a chunk of time. Maybe you meet your spouse and maybe you have a baby or two, that's a chunk of time. And then, you're grinding it out and you're trying to make it, that's a chunk of time. Then you have like a short time period where you can be on cruise control, you've established yourself, your kids are getting older, that's a chunk of time. And then you're old, right? How many chunks of time is that? Maybe like 5, 6, 7, 8 chunks of time that aren't even that long. But you look back and you don't realize that a chunk of time is over until it's over. Like, you don't realize how fast school goes until you look back and you realize you're done with it. You don't realize, like, when you start a new job, this is probably temporary, and this chunk of time, like maybe you work there for 5 years, you don't realize that's a chunk of time in your life that maybe that's like the good old days, but then eventually it's over, right? And you look back and you're like, oh man, like that chunk of time is gone. And when you put it in like segments of like maybe 4 or 5 chunks of time in your whole entire life, that's kind of depressing. Like, you think about how fast they go. It can be rough. Anyways, there was this lady that I knew when I was living in the brick house. She was a few houses down, maybe like 5 houses down. And she was an ill woman. She was actually a couple years younger than me. And she was nice to look at, and she was a decent person, but she was an ill woman. And she would meet men, and they would have very intense, very passionate, loving relationships that would last for a very short period of time. So she would meet a guy, and it was like this amazing honeymoon phase. Like, the two of them would just be head over heels in love, like going on vacations together. The guys would think like, oh my God, I can't believe I've met someone like this. I've never had this type of a connection before. Like, this woman is just so amazing. I remember one guy in particular had built a porch swing on her front porch within a couple of weeks after they got together. And the two of them would sit on the front porch every night as the sun was going down and, have a beer or a glass of wine, and they would just sit there together. And they seemed to hit it off, and it seemed like they had a really good relationship. But like I said, she was an ill woman, and something would trigger her. It was like some form of post-coital dysphoria or something of that nature, and it would trigger her borderline personality disorder. So this would happen maybe a month into the relationship. I think the longest one that I saw was about a year. But typically within the first couple of months, something would trigger it. And she would basically go insane. And she would have to call a neighbor or a family member and tell them to tell the guy to get out. And she never wants to speak to him again. And she would have to have somebody come over, like, me and another neighbor had to come over and help take the swing down. She couldn't call him to take the swing down. She couldn't stand to look at it herself. As a matter of fact, she couldn't even come home until she knew the swing was gone, because it would have made her totally sick to look at it. Now, she had a pretty severe mental disorder, she worked a job, and I'm sure she was good at her job. She could take care of herself, pay her own bills. She was healthy, she worked out, but she was ill mentally, and it only came out whenever she would fall deeply in love, which was very strange. But the reason why I'm telling that story is because it's almost as if the current structure or the current system of society in terms of relationships and family and friendship building is conducive to meeting the needs of someone like that. And it's not conducive to long-term relationship building in the way that most of us would like to see it. It's kind of just the way it is. We're sort of programmed to almost view people as conquests, and you never want to move backwards, right? It's kind of like in school. The conquest is to pass whatever grade you're in, whatever class you're in. And if you go backwards or you get held back, it's humiliating, it's insulting. And we're sort of programmed to be that way with relationships and friendships as well. So it's like this conquest to get laid, or to, can I get this woman to like me? Or maybe a woman wants a man to like her. And then once they establish that connection, the conquest is over. They've completed the mission. And now it's time to move on to the next. I know a lot of people think that sounds like narcissistic personality disorder. And I don't think that's the case, because narcissistic personality disorder has to, that requires a lack of empathy or an inability to empathize with other people. And I don't think that's really what it is. I think most people have an ability to empathize with other people. They just don't have the structure. The society isn't built in this day and age to be structured that way. If you go back to previous generations, probably the boomers and generations before them, they would have the same friends and the same extended family their whole lives. They may meet one spouse, they maybe add one best friend to the mix, but the people that they knew as kids are the same people they know when they get old. And they take care of the parents take care of the kids, and then the kids take care of the parents when the parents get old. And you kind of have these communities, and your neighbors. You own your homes. Like all the people on your block, or all the homes are owned by families. And maybe their children own the homes when they pass away. But that's not what happens anymore. Now most people are living in apartment complexes, and if you live in an apartment complex and there's dozens or hundreds of apartments in the complex, it's likely that you don't know any of your neighbors. Maybe you know one or two, but you literally live in the same building, the same facility, with hundreds of people, and you don't know any of them. You don't even know their names. You don't know their families. You don't know what they do for a living. You don't know anything about them. And even if you live in like a suburb or a small town or even a rural area, you likely don't know your neighbors. Maybe you go to your job and you don't even know your coworkers. You walk in and you put on face and you say, "Hey, how are you doing?" But you don't know their families. You don't know anything about them. You don't know really who they are outside of work. And they're just here for this chunk of time. But eventually, whether it's the house you live in, the apartment you live in, the car you drive, the job you work at, the person you're in a relationship with, they're here for this chunk of time, but you'll move on to another chunk of time. And it's and the reason why I say that's a red pill, it's very sad to think about. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever watched the music video Time by Pink Floyd. It's a short music video, and it's a decent classic song from previous generations, but it's actually kind of like a horror movie. It's kind of scary to watch. It trips you out a little bit. It kind of just shows how fast life goes. And he kind of, I wouldn't say it goes through chunks of time, but it's just like a very quick time lapse from birth to death. And yeah, I don't know. It's something to think about. But I just think the current structure of society is really built for short-term, what have you done for me lately style of relationships, and it's not really built for long-term. And we're programmed that way, and most people have this sort of popcorn brain where they don't actually want to be with the same person for the rest of their lives. It's, it's crazy, but seems like that's just where we're at, I don't know what we can really do to change that, because that's been the trajectory for the last 30 years, and we're moving quickly further in that direction. So, I think we just kind of have to deal with it. But what I would say, if you're somebody that recognizes this stuff, if you don't recognize it, I'm not really trying to argue with people or debate with people. I'm just kind of speaking based on what I see from my perspective. Keep in mind, I have a life. I work outside of YouTube, and I do things outside of YouTube, but I do try to study some of these subjects so I can have some interesting conversations with you guys, because I do like discussing these subjects, but it's just what I see from my perspective. Anyways, my best advice to you, if you're somebody that does see it, you do kind of understand what's been happening and the direction that we're going in. What I do, and I've been trying to figure out a way to put this into words, because it almost doesn't make sense, but I have this tendency to put women into these two different categories, and it's not really a bad way. It's not a bad thing. Really, I put people in these two categories. And people are different, whatever, but there's one category, and these are people that love stimulation. They need constant stimulation. They don't really like to focus on one thing for an extended time period. They like to be stimulated. These are the people that, they always have to be entertaining themselves somehow, or maybe they always have to be at the club, or loud music, or drinking, or smoking, or hooking up with new people constantly, and they have an excessive need for attention. These are people that just need a constant source of stimulation. And once they've burnt out the maximum level of stimulation they can get from one thing, it's not enough, and they have to go to move on to something else. A lot of people are like that. Call it what you want, but we've enabled that sort of behavior, and you can just expect to find it from both men and women. But then the other type of person is somebody that prioritizes focus. They like to focus on specific tasks. This is a person that maybe would rather be at home reading a book than being out at the club drinking and listening to loud music, right? And somebody that prioritizes focus typically views stimulation as a distraction, so they try to avoid it, right? And that's the type of people that I like to surround myself with. And you can spot them out. You can see a girl working out at the gym, and you can tell which category she's in. Is she trying to dress sexy and get attention? Is she trying to flirt with everybody and bend over in front of people and look good in front of people? Does she just have an excessive need for attention and admiration? Or is she a girl that has her head facing forward? She's focused on her muscle-mind connection, really just slowly muscle-mind connection, getting the reps in. She's concentrated. And if you try to talk to her, she views it as a distraction. And not that she's bitchy or something, it's just that she's focused, and she doesn't want you to ruin her focus. I think those are two personality types, and it's not introverted or extroverted. It's not shy or outgoing. It has nothing to do with being promiscuous or being conservative or whatever. It's just personality type. Some people like to focus on tasks. Some people, they need constant stimulation. And I think the people that focus on tasks, that's the kind of woman that you would want raising your kids. It's the kind of woman that, you know, maybe she likes to read, she likes to crochet, she likes to do gardening. You know, that's the kind of woman that if she has a kid, she'll have them in the shopping cart at the store and she'll have the kid participate. Like, which ones are the blueberries? Those. Yeah, you got it right. Good job. Which ones are the strawberries? You know, very focused. Like she does things with purpose, with intent. Right? Yep, here we go with thunderstorming again. Alright guys, I can't be having the camera and the microphone out here when it's pouring down rain. I wasn't prepared for this, so I guess we're going to have to go ahead and shut this one off. But I hope this video was somewhat informative, and that's about it for today guys. Until next time, see ya.